Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me, and thank you so much for joining us for this session. Firstly, let me sort of apologize for any potential confusion caused by the Zoom invites. It was always our intention to start at 11 a.m., but I think some of you might have received a notification 30 minutes earlier. So we'll begin the session now. So thank you so much for joining. Good morning again, and welcome to another sort of edition of our Ask the Expert series. So we started this series a month ago, and essentially what we want to do is to facilitate discussions on issues of concern to modern Nigerians. The first one was sort of talking about how to maintain and preserve wealth in 2021, which is a very special year. And this session today will be about discussing the benefits and challenges that are associated with coupling finances within the context of a marriage or a civil partnership. So I think this is a topic that is relevant in this year of all years, when you have lots of homes with wildly different financial outcomes, partly due to the economic crisis we find ourselves in. So what I do hope that you get out of the session is that you get your perspectives challenged, and that you hopefully leave with some clear actions and resolutions that you can use in your specific context. Here at FSH Fair Pay, this is a topic that is dear to our hearts. And this is because Vested, which is our financial well-being platform that we're launching in Q2 of this year, is designed specifically to help individuals that are seeking to solve the problem of when, how, and also to what extent to couple finances with a significant other. Before we start, I'll try and keep my opening address short and to the point. I'd like to thank the speakers for making the time to share their expertise with us. We really do appreciate it. We have a varied panel of speakers today that includes Elma Ezera, who is a family lawyer and a partner who specializes in family law. We have Maryam Mohammed, who is a halal wealth advisor and who brings a very kind of unique perspective to this discussion, as well as Abiodun Ogunoiki, who is a risk management professional and also a personal wealth advisor as well. So I think he's bringing also like a very different perspective to the discussion. So many thanks to the three of you really for honoring us with your presence. And I'd also like to thank my colleagues for their support in organizing and promoting the webinar. So I think all the other subsidiaries across the FSDH group. I will now hand you over to Chidera, who heads our branding and marketing function, and who will be moderating today's discussions. I hope you find them fruitful. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Obi. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. I mean, the pandemic has availed us opportunities to connect real time with people all over the world. And even though we'd rather have these sessions in person, the fact that we are now able to have them virtually means this discussion can now be a global one. Our topic of discussion today touches on money and love, two very powerful subjects. And these subjects are thorny at the best of times, and even more so in an environment where we have couples with varying financial capacities due to the economic impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, when you consider that about a third of adults with partners report that money is a big source of conflict in their relationships, it's no wonder that financial problems are a leading cause of tension and divorce in marriages. And that's why we at Vested care deeply about your financial wellness. And we're confident that we've convened a panel that is able to do justice to this discussion. I'll start by introducing Elma Ezera. Elma is a happily married family law expert, passionate about family and educating people on family law issues. She holds a master's degree and a first degree in law, and is currently a partner at Erinma, Onwuka & Co. She is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association and the International Federation of Women Lawyers. She has handled several family law cases and is the convener of Family Law Issues with Elma on Facebook. She will be sharing interesting insights and case studies that relate to the law in Nigeria and coupling finances. It's a pleasure to have you here, Elma. We also have Maryam Shehu Mohammed. Maryam is a Muslimah wife, mother, daughter, sister, friend, and global citizen. Professionally, she is a halal investment advisor, helping Muslims around the world discover, work, and sustain halal wealth, to leave a legacy for many generations. She is a director at a private halal investment advisory firm called Wealth Paradigm Ethical Advisory. And she has been investing privately and professionally for over a decade. She is a chartered financial analyst, level 3 candidate, and soon to be an associate at the Global Chartered Institute of Islamic Finance Professionals. Thank you, Maryam. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much, Chidera.
Yeah. We would also be speaking with Abiodun Ogunoiki. He is the Deputy Chief Risk Officer and Financial Advisor at FSDH Merchant Bank. Abiodun spent over a decade at KPMG Nigeria, and where he was providing risk and capital management, regulatory due diligence, internal control and audit, and forensic services to companies and organizations in the private and public sectors. Abiodun is also a CFA charter holder, and he advises on personal finance, investments, and money management. Abiodun will be sharing insights on strategic finance planning for couples and partners. Abiodun, thank you so much for making our time for this.
Thank you, Chidera, for having me on board.
You're welcome. And just to share a few instructions, following our panel discussions, we would open the session up for questions from our audience. We encourage you to share questions using the Q&A feature on Zoom. We would like to keep the session interactive, even while we conduct the panel discussions. Please feel free to share your comments using the chat feature. And you can use the reaction emojis as well. For example, thumbs up, clapping emojis if you find something interesting. As liberally as your personal style will allow. And also, while the conversations are going on, you can let us know where you're joining us from, share your thoughts. I'm in Lagos, Nigeria at the moment. You can also let us know how long you've been married for, if you're married, and you can share your biggest money worries as a couple, and if you're single, you can share what your biggest financial scares are at the moment. But just to move ahead, I would like to know, Maryam, because just taking from what Elma has said, and looking at this power plays that we've just described, what are the right finance questions that couples or partners should be asking themselves, especially in this year of uncertainties with the looming recession?
Okay, thank you very much, Chidera. I think, first of all, I'll group my answer into two sections. One for the unmarried and the other one for the married couples. For unmarried couples, if you're unmarried and you're joining us, welcome and congratulations, because I wish I had something like this when I was about to get married. So I'd like to tell you to focus on three things, three key questions. One, is your spouse equal to your flyness? And I'm quoting this lady called Vivian Hunt. She's a partner at McKinsey. And in 2018, we all sat together. I was already married at the time. But what she said really struck a chord. She said, Beyonce isn't married to some random, guy from my village in Kano, right? She's married to Jay-Z. He's equal to her flyness. When they got married, that was I would say, the job description. Naturally, when you have those kinds of unions, the person then becomes the wind beneath your wings. okay? And not the person that will help clip the wings, you know, so that you can't fly because they are afraid of you, of losing you. Some people are not just wicked, it's just the fear of losing you, all right? So make sure before you select a spouse, are they equal to you in flyness? One. Question number two, I like to say, what's love got to do with it? All right, that's the question. But what I really want to say is, how many of us have seen situations, I personally have been in one, where I was almost manipulated to becoming what the other person wanted. And how many of us have watched this show Bridgerton recently, the hit series on Netflix? I'm going to reference two main characters. All right, so someone says me, all right, so a lot of people have, I guess. So the relationship between Andrew and Sienna, as unlawful as it is, we're not going into the whole, you know, whatever, but Andrew is this high-class Bridgerton guy, all right? He's from Regency, you know, London. And this Sienna, as beautiful as she is, as much as he loved her, she had to accept and respect that, okay, the dynamics here aren't working for me. So she let him know that, and she walked away, and he also had to walk away. That's very important, right? Don't allow anyone manipulate you into thinking like poverty is a virtue, so you have to stay in that poverty zone with that person. Don't allow that. It could be a lady as well. A lady is manipulating you, for example, to say, well, I'm like a Sienna, but you have to, you know, stay away from your own family for me to join you. The third thing that I would say for the unmarried is home dynamics. Learn the home dynamics of the person you're going to marry. Who's the breadwinner in his family? And does he want that? If it's his mother that was the breadwinner, chances are he may want you to be the breadwinner. And sister, you got to be ready. If you're not ready, tell the nigga bye-bye. Okay. And if it's a guy and the dynamics are reversed and the lady just wants to chill, maybe her mom was a chiller in the house. She didn't do anything. Know this, because she would want you to be her sole provider. And if you're not ready, say bye-bye. Now, key thing to note, and I am building on what Sister Ezera said. I think her name is Ezera. She said this. Now, I'm recording. In these climes, in Nigeria, in this world, from the time of hunter-gatherers, the man is the provider. Please don't hear anything, please, I cannot hear it, all right? The man is the provider. If you're a Muslim, in Islam, he is your provider, all right? So men, know this. Avoid see finish if you're a guy. Provide for your family, okay? And ladies, if you want to perhaps work or something, just be sure that you give, you augment, all right? There's no compulsion in actually spending on your family. So I'll move very quickly into the other section. And someone's arguing with me already. These times, I know. However, he should be the first breadwinner, right? The first one to handle the basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, and you augment with all your stylish, you know, chilling and clothes. Now, for married couples, 3 things. Focus on inflation. That's it. If you ask me, it's all about inflation. Do we continue to fight and complain about inflation, or do we plan ahead of it? And to plan ahead of inflation, you need to know 3 things. First of all, do we have income generating assets? Second of all, do we have multiple sources of sustainable income? 3, are our investments inflation protected? That is, do they rise with inflation like real estate? Or do we have a portfolio that when combined together, the returns, the principal plus profit cumulatively beat inflation? That's it. Thank you, Chidera.
Thank you so much, Maryam. I think Maryam just puts a lot of things in perspective, because I read in a recent interview by Encomium that it takes about 70,000 naira a month, a minimum of 70,000 naira a month to raise an average Nigerian child in Nigeria. And you know, this amount is inclusive of food and clothing and exclusive of school fees. And you know, Maryam just touched on inflation, and I want to know, Abiodun, how will inflation affect lifestyles and major bills like school fees, rent? You know, this year, what can smart couples do to mitigate this impact?
Thank you, Chidera, and good morning, everyone, once again. When we talk about inflation, I think the first thing we need to know is that inflation reduces the purchasing power of your money. So what you tend to say is that the expenses like the school fees, the cost of food, the rent would typically rise with inflation. So what smart couples must do is to invest along investment spectrum such that the average portfolio return must always be above the inflation rate. So, Maryam has talked a bit about inflation rates because that is something that you cannot control. But the point you need to then do is to ride above the inflation rate. So every smart couple should target a portfolio average return that beats inflation. As of January 2021, the inflation rate in Nigeria is about 16.47%. So what that means to you is that you need to have a combination of the low rates, the medium rates, the high rates, such that by the time you do your average return, you should have a return that is above 16.47. If you have a return that is lower than that, what that means for you is that it's better for you to just consume the money today, because what it can buy today, it cannot buy it in years to come if you continue to be below the inflation rate. But should you then consume everything today, it's also not advisable. So then that leaves you with no other option but to ride above the inflation rate. So things you could consider could be to plan your purchases. So you could look at seasonal sales, you could look at discounts, you could look at group buying, bulk buying as applicable. Then as smart couples, one other thing you can do is to target some expense components and knock them down or reduce them. For example, the cost of raising children. What can you do? You can establish an education fund and start saving even ahead for the children and having returns. And you could also decide to probably buy a home and knock off the rent in years to come, because you know that these are expenses. You have to pay rent in years to come. So by the time you actually do a proper planning and you also invest along a spectrum, then you should be able to beat the inflation rate and ride above the inflation curve. So in summary, smart couples should beat the inflation rate. The average portfolio returns should always be above inflation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abiodun. I'll come back to you, but I want us to understand like the basis and the foundation of this. So I'm going to circle back to Elma, and Elma, most couples are wary, about losing their financial independence. Maryam mentioned a few things, that talked about financial independence and what's obtainable and not. So I just want to know, is there a philosophy of marriage that, or rather, how feasible is the philosophy in partnership of what is mine is yours? So this philosophy of what is mine is yours in the partnership of today, how would you advise partners to define yours, mine, and ours?
Thank you, Chidera. Okay, so on what is mine, ours, and yours and ours, I'll let you know that Nigerian customary law, for example, doesn't have anything to do with it doesn't stop you as a person from having your own property. It doesn't stop your spouse from having his property, and it doesn't stop you from having joint property. But if you're married under the Nigerian you're married under the Act, which is, of course, like we'll say, the white wedding, church wedding, court marriage, when you have joint property, the court gets to decide, in terms of divorce, the court gets to decide on what goes to the other person. Now, my advice, my philosophy, my personal philosophy on this is have your account. He has his account, and then we have our account. This helps because I always say that you don't let the other person feel like he is being cheated on. For example, in my family, my husband is the saver, I am the spender. Now we decided to have a joint account so that we both bring our resources and join it together and then achieve better goals. If he alone brings and I spend, he will feel cheated. If I bring a loan and he spends, he will feel cheated. So we decided that if I want to buy my human hair buy my clothes, I take from my personal account. If he wants to do if we want to do big projects like paying for house rent, doing the things that we need to get done, financial investments, of course, we'll do our accounts together. Now, when divorce arises, that's the question. When you do this together, when divorce arises, how do you share these properties? The court determines that. My usual advice, I can say again, my advice is always have yours, his, and ours. It's a feasible philosophy and it is good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alma. So you're just saying couples should play on their strengths, like know who the spender is and who the saver is, and then just leverage on that, and that would just help them win. But Maryam, I mean, there's this popular saying that where your money or treasure is, there also your heart will be. Can you please share with us what an unhealthy or healthy coupling of earnings looks like? I mean, how can people tell if they're in this situation?
Okay, this is a very, very good question. So for me personally, I would say unhealthy coupling of earnings looks like witchcraft and wizardry, in my opinion. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to say, if your spouse, and I'm going to say a man, for example, but men, please don't feel attacked. I'm going to keep it as balanced as I can. If a man doesn't allow you handle your own money yourself, example, have your own bank account, wahala deal. If you cannot treat yourself without your wife running after you with a calculator, tabulating how much you have spent and how much you chop the children's bobo money or something, wahala deal. If neither of you can comfortably tell the other about a promotion at work, a new property you want to buy, or a gift you got from someone, a friend or family, without the other one quarreling you, wahala deal. So these are, if you ask me, in a nutshell, some of the red flags, some of the things to look out for. The remedy, like Ezra said, I can't agree with her more, Elma, sorry. Well, like she said, is separate bank accounts. I would say your formula, you decide what formula works for you. For example, Elma says the joint financial investments happen between them. I don't subscribe to that, but I respect her opinion. So what I subscribe to is having separate bank accounts, and I have my own investments while he has his. And whenever I want to spend, we spend. But like Elma says, when we want to take joint decisions that have to do with family, school fees or stuff, I can decide to augment together in a pool with my husband. But my husband knows that he's the sole provider for our very primary needs, while I neatly augment whenever possible. And it's at my discretion. And I respect him, and he also respects me for doing that. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you, Maryam. So Elma touched on power plays and Maryam touched on financial infidelity, where one spouse hides money from the other. And I mean, Abiodun, how would you advise couples to invest their funds together, when they have vastly different attitudes towards risk and spending patterns?
Thank you, Chidera. It may appear very difficult to happen, but I mean, I have some key recommendations, which I mean, it's just a suggestion. So, but the key one, it's an ongoing communication on the need to save and invest. So there needs to be an ongoing communication. There should also be an agreement on the saving and investment tactics. So the question is, how do we want to save? How do we want to implement this? We want to have like I have my account, you have your account, and we have a joint one. What really is our investment tactics? So they need to discuss that. And they also need to have an implementation of those terms of the agreement. There should not be anybody like doing anything outside those terms of agreement. And the discussion should typically lead to like an agreement between both of them. And that discussion that will lead to that agreement should be carefully held. So it's not a situation where the man says, hey, we have to do it together. I mean, there needs to be, the discussion needs to be held, carefully. I think that's the key point. So I could also share from my own personal experience. So I've been married for about 10 years. And in terms of finance attitudes, my wife's view and mine are slightly different. So for example, I'm very future oriented, okay, in 5, 10 years time, 15 years time, this is what I want and all that. But she is more of a balancing between now and the future. So, and if you talk about our investments, she takes more risk than I do. So to some extent, we have a bit of a slight difference in the way we see finance. But our meeting point is that for the first 9 years of our marriage, we maintain a joint pool approach, whereby we consolidate everybody's income into one. And we maintain like a budget on an Excel spreadsheet. We assign responsibilities, and we tend to like track the outcome of that. And despite that, we pay ourselves on a monthly basis. We have investment in both in our names, not like this is my own, this is your own, and all that. And then in the 10th year, we actually introduce a bit of flexibility to that, so to enable us to spend a bit more. So what we did in our 10th year was that, let's have a short break. I mean, let's spend more at will, but our joint investment continued to grow, and each party contributes to it at will. So we still meet our objectives, and in fact, this flexibility is a bit even more happier than even the initial one. But like I mentioned, it's just for a period. And the other key thing I would say this current one is more interesting is because probably our earning has also increased relative to prior year vis-a-vis our expenses. And we are both investment savvy. So we try to like, okay, I'm going to do this investment, I'm going to do this investment. And we are kind of like, we are seeing who really does better in each of these. And we've also done some capital expenditures in the first 9 years, which at least put our minds at rest. So to talk about dealing with this, I would say it is important for the couple to have an agreement. What works for both of you? There needs to be an ongoing communication. It should not be forced by one party on the other. So once the communication is done, an agreement is made, then each party should commit to the agreement done in the communication. So it's open to different families. Know what works for you and stick with what works for you.
Okay, thank you, Abiodun. I mean, you mentioned that you and your wife do like an Excel sheet where detail all your spend and everything. But I don't think couples in Nigeria would go as far as using an Excel sheet. So can you recommend another way that couples can, track
Definitely.
their money and
Definitely.
yeah.
So there are different applications that can help you do that now. So I know FSH as a group, you also have an app that can help you track your budget and also how you spend. So I mean, I'm talking about 10 years ago, So I mean, technology and improvements is an ongoing thing. So typically there are apps now that help you to track it. And I know FSA Fairpay also has an app too that helps you to integrate those the spending, the budget, the approval, the notification, and all that. So there are apps that do that as we speak today.
Yeah, vested also would help couples and individuals also be able to track their spend and their savings and investments. But Abiodun, I'm still on you, and I just want to know, and I'm sure our audience want to know too, what kind of investments and saving plans will you recommend for Nigerian couples, in different life stages? So for example, newlyweds, or a 5-year-old, 10-year-old couple with kids, a retired couple. And then would this strategy differ for Nigerian couples living abroad?
Thank you, Chidera, for that. So before I'll answer the question, I would like to set the tone on two different points. The first one is the type of investment, and the second one is the stages of life. Then after that, then I will map the different families to those two foundations. So, or foundational points. So when I talk about investment, typically I look at investment in 3 categories. I look at the low risk, the medium risk, and the high risk. So when I say low risk, what do I mean? I mean investment like direct investment in treasury bills, direct investment in federal government bonds, and investment in mutual funds. When I look at a medium risk, riskier than low risk, but less riskier than high risk. But it suffices to say that the more risk you take,
I think we've lost Abiodun. I think I'll just circle back to Maryam. Maryam, yeah, Abiodun, lost you for a few minutes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, I'll go back a bit.
Okay, we lost you. Yes, please.
Okay, so I will take the investments again. So I talked about low risk investments, which include direct investment in treasury bills, direct investment in federal government bonds, and investment in mutual funds. And medium risk include investment in income stock, which is a type of investment. So you are investing to earn dividends. So example is when you invest in the shares of Nigerian tier 1 banks, you are assured of like dividends most cases. So in that you tilt around the medium risk because you can still lose the capital gain. Now, high risk investments include investment in growth stock, FX trading, investment in unquoted companies, and also investment in agri-tech offerings. So some of these are actually very risky, but they're going to give you a higher return. So what I typically advise people is to invest along the spectrum of the low, the medium, and the high. So I haven't talked about that. The other thing to also mention is that when you invest, what really do you consider? You consider your return objective. One of the things we've talked about today is that you need to invest to beat inflation, otherwise you will lose the purchasing power of your money. The number two is to look at your risk objective. What is your risk tolerance? What's your ability to take risk? What's your willingness to take risk? It's also important for you to look at that. Then, of course, your liquidity and time horizon. You don't want to invest, and then when you need your money, you cannot have the money back. So you have to consider your liquidity, investment horizon, and also you also look at taxes. How do you appropriately plan such that you can plan your tax effectively? Now, I haven't talked about investment. I want to talk also about the stages of some say 4, some say 3, or at least they are equivalent. So if I go with the 4, there is a foundation stage, stage, there's a maintenance stage, and there's a distribution stage. For those that say 3, I can say then I will mark maintenance and distribution. The foundation stage, early part of your years, you are getting your academic certifications, you are starting work. Accumulation stage is when you start increasing in earnings and you are accumulating wealth. Then the maintenance stage and distribution stage is after your retirement. You are planning who is going to take over my wealth after I exist, after I'm gone. So, but the general trend is that as people grow older and move along the years, they tend to take lesser risk. So you take more risk at the foundation stage than you take at the maintenance and distribution stage. So going back to your question, newlyweds and marriages up to 5 years, I will map them, and this is my mapping, I will map them on that foundation stage. So in this stage, there are low expenses, there are low assets, there are low liabilities. And the characteristics of this foundation stage is that they take above average risk. In other words, the average portfolio rating, when I talk about average risk, I always talk about portfolio rating, not an individual rating, because I look at all my investment as a portfolio. So the average portfolio will tilt more towards the high risk. I've talked about the low, medium, and high risk. So for the newlywed, the foundation stage, they will tilt more towards the high risk. So if they lose the capital, they can always make it back because they are still young. The investment horizon is usually very long. Now, when I move to above 5 years and those with kids, I will map them to the accumulation stage. So what typically happens in this stage is that you have an increased earning. Your assets are accumulating. But the other thing is that your expenses too are rising. The school fees are rising, your children are going towards marriages and all that. So expenses too are rising. So typically for this group of people, the recommendation usually is to have an average risk. So the portfolio rating, I haven't considered all the different types of investment along the spectrum, will tilt towards the medium risk. And the investment horizon also is usually a long-term horizon. Then I'll move to the last group, which is a retired couple. So these people, I will map them under the maintenance and the distribution stages. So the focus really is to maintain their standard of living in years to come and how to transfer the wealth to children or to different foundations. And you see them talking about trust, wills, and all that. So typically for people in this category, the average portfolio rating will tilt towards the low risk, and investment horizon is usually short. And the major reason is that if they lose the principal, then it will be difficult for them to make it again. So, there's a question that, does this apply to only Nigerians or even Nigerians that are, of course, everybody's traveling out of the country? The point is that this is actually universal, it's irrespective of the location. The final point I want to make also is this: every couple should also have a financial estimation of how much they need to be saving today to plan for life after retirement. So typically, what do you need to do? You need to look at what kind of life you want to live after retirement. Define the possible income you are going to get post-retirement. Consider your retirement savings account. I know most people actually have savings account in this period compared to the prior period when you have the defined benefits. And then you discount those values to today's value. So that will give you a sense of how much you need to make at this time so that you can be able to live the kind of life you want to live in years to come. And it's important for every couple to actually have that information handy, because that will guide how they live today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abiodun. You really, you've broken these things down, and I think a lot of us now understand, some of things like high risk, accumulation stage, and low risk, and how couples can leverage and know what to do in every particular stage, that they're in. And Maryam, just drawing from what Abiodun has shared, and I mean, you spoke about red flags earlier. What are the financial red flags that young couples and families need to look out for? And at what point should they begin to seek for help professionally?
Okay, all right, thank you, Chidera. I think one of the three key red flags that I would mention, of course there are more, but these are the ones that came to me. First of all, if you cannot reconcile the new income suddenly, maybe living large, that compared to the income that for example, this person begins to drive Mercedes on an income that is 100K, known income to you. Maybe the person works in a particular place and his income is 100K. Suddenly this person is driving certain cars or certain things. And I'm saying this person, it could be either spouse. That is a red flag. Secondly, when there is a lot of avoidance when you ask questions around money, or too much secrecy, I like to believe that every marriage is built on a foundation of communication. And when there's too much secrecy about questions around money, for example, you ask for school fees or things that are paramount, like food, money for food, and then you get an I don't have. And then the person just walks in with a new pair of Nikes or a pair of Manolo Blahniks or new hair, human hair that's expensive. That's a red flag, okay? Avoidance and secrecy. A third red flag that I can think of is negligence. Negligence is the sister or brother to manipulation. When the person completely ignores their duty of provision. And I've been seeing in the chat boxes, people have been asking me, what about 21st century marriages? Is the man still supposed to provide? Well, I understand that this topic is a bit sensitive, perhaps to people whose cultures and religions don't prescribe this. So I'm talking from a very Muslim perspective. The man is the provider. It's his duty to provide, okay? If he does not, and the wife, then that is negligence. We consider that complete negligence. And especially if the provider then turns around to say, well, you're earning more than me, you should provide. That's also a red flag, because that's not her duty. It is out of the goodness of her heart that she should, okay? So negligence and manipulation is also a red flag. If that happens, seek counsel. Please do not be quiet.
Okay, thank you, Maryam. I mean, you mentioned negligence, avoidance, and secrecy, and I think Elma, I think you should be able to provide more information on this. Have you developed a view on the relationship between money management approaches and the health of marriages? I mean, considering what Maryam just shared.
You're muted.
Thank you. Okay. We've seen situations now where people, of course, like she said, a man is a provider and a woman is to help, assist. But in recent times also, we've seen that people are now joining their finances together to achieve better aims in their family. Now, we've seen situations where they've put forces together and then in the end, there is a divorce. I'm talking about divorce basically because I'm talking from the family law position. Now, people join their finances together and there is a divorce. How do you remedy this? How do we stop this? My advice basically to people is when you're buying, let's say you're investing together or you're buying a property together, ensure that your names are on both your names are on the documents. I've seen people say, oh, our names are on the document, and then they say, what was on the document? They say Mrs. Biodun, for example, Mrs. Biodun Abubakar, or you say Mrs. Biodun, Mr. and Mrs. Abubakar. It should actually be Mrs. Biodun Abubakar and Mr. Obi Abubakar. It should be clearly stated. If not, when the chips are down, in many marriages, the chips go down. When the chips are down, you end up seeing that all your hard work go to nothing. The man or the person whose name is on the document gets everything. When it's a joint account, so to speak, also ensure that your names are both on the documents. There's a case in law, of course, Mojeku versus Mojeku, where the man died and his family, his brother, was supposed to inherit the property of the man. Reason, because he did not, of course, I'm sure she saw the red flags. The man had money in accounts and the wife did not know about it. So we should always ensure that you know what is happening, especially if your own money is involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elma. A recent study showed that coupling finances may help couples grow their savings and investments faster, through compound interest. I mean, more savings equals more interest earned. Abiodun, we know the importance of planning. You mentioned planning ahead and long and short-term goals. So we know the importance of planning for emergencies and saving towards projects and goals. Are there specific strategies to employ to effectively do this?
Okay, Chidera, I'm going to be talking about probably roughly about 10 points in no particular order. So I think number one is that couples should actually have a budget, preferably a monthly budget. And number two is to stick to the budget. I've mentioned initially that when you're coming up with the budgets, there needs to be a respect for one another. There should be a communication, not that one person will do a budget and dump on the other person. It should be a mutual discussion and they arrive at a budget. And the second one is to stick to the budget. The number three, which we have talked about, is to invest to beat inflation. Number four is to invest across the spectrum and not just individual products. So you allow for short horizon where you can always liquidate to meet emergencies. Then number five, which is very important, is to also save on a monthly basis. So personally, I typically aim to save 45% of my income and I invest it so that I can have much more. And the way I see it is that it's like the opposite of a loan. If I save and invest, I earn something. If I take a loan, I pay more. So what I try to do is to do like a deferred enjoyment such that I then have more income. So I typically save about 45% of my income as I go, and then the income also replicates and give more income. Then of course, it's important to monitor your investments. Use applications to track your investments, or you can use the basic level of Excel that I mentioned earlier on, but it's easier now to use applications with which I've mentioned also. FSA can actually help with that. And of course, you should also grow your income level. Write professional exams, develop yourself, earn more in essence. Seek to earn more, seek to grow your career, seek to gain other sources of income. Then number 8 is to understand and practice basic concepts like risk-return trade-off. So where you see an opportunity where you even have more returns than the corresponding risk is an arbitrage opportunity to leverage on. So understand that the higher risk you take, higher returns, but there are sometimes you have a mismatch in the market where you have a lower risk, yes, you have a higher return. You should be familiar with those kind of little basic concepts. Then of course, understand the time value of money. There is no point keeping your money idle. I always pride in when I sleep and I wake up, I know money is dropping somewhere for me. So set your money into good use. Let money drop for you. The 100 naira today is not the same as 100 naira tomorrow. So there is a time value of money. If you are not using it today, put it into good use and earn something on that. And of course, still talking about the basic concept is that you need to also diversify. Don't stay in one basket, but spread your investment across the horizon. Then do not invest in products you do not understand. I mean, that's the basic thing. Always ensure you know how that thing makes money. And of course, seek knowledge, consult professional experts, e.g. your bankers, and of course, FSH also has different subsidiaries that you can also speak to. So I think those are some of the basic comments I can ask or I can talk on for now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Abiodun. I mean, you mentioned have a budget and stick to that budget, expand your sources of income, set your money to good use, and a couple of other very interesting points. Okay, so we would take our poll questions now, and then during the session, we'll just take like a 5 minutes or less break. We would share the poll session, the poll questions now. So these questions were, I mean, they revolve around some of the questions that our audience have been asking, and we would just share the polls now. Please, I encourage everyone to respond to this poll while we take a short break. Thank you. Okay, so our results are coming in. Okay, so we'll be ending the polling session now. So far, 81 people have responded to the poll. I think I'll just give it a few more seconds so more people can respond. Okay, I'll be ending the polling session now. Thank you so much, guys, for your patience. So the results are in, and I mean, based on the results, Abiodun, we can see that a lot of 24% of our audience want to couple their finances with their partners, but they don't know how to, or they want to, but can you share how they can do this effectively? Abiodun, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. So essentially, one very primary point or pivotal point is communication and agreement. And I'm sure Elma also has emphasized that. So that needs to be in place. And then the discussion around the budgeting needs to be well done. Because if that trust is missing, it will be very difficult. And if you go into a joint and then you are not getting value, you will actually be very frustrated. So I would say the first key things to address is communication between the two partners. And it also goes as far back as before you even got married. What are your objectives? How did you come about? Which also Maryam talked about. Be careful who you marry. So when you have somebody that you both have the common goal, common agreement, then you can be able to leverage that in actually having, these are my goals and saving plan. Let's work together towards this. So I would think that once you can address the communication, the relationship, that if that is in place, then you can then go ahead to talk about what is our plan. And just to also add to it, before people get married, they always say, what's your goal? They talk together. But when they get into marriage, most people don't plan again. They're already in marriage and they feel things just go. So it's also important to still have an ongoing communication and plan as we go. So once that is in place, it will be easy to do a budgeting and to stick with that.
Thank you, Abiodun. That's really interesting. Maryam, a lot of our poll just showed that a lot of couples are interested in investing together and to build their wealth. Can you share strategies on how they can effectively do this as well?
Okay, absolutely. I think first of all, I would love to speak for those of us in this room who in the past may have believed that we had limitations around investing. So basically around our ethics and our faith, our values, surrounding our faith. So I would say it, but again, everybody in this room can also benefit from some of the things I'm going to say. So how can you benefit from investing in these times that we're in, especially when you're coming in from a halal perspective? So you're wondering, where can I put my money without squandering my own values, my own religious beliefs? I'll go back a little bit. What exactly is halal investing? So basically, halal wealth is based on the premise of acquiring and using your wealth to please the Almighty. That's what it is, essentially. So we believe that you have a manual from your maker and you follow that manual, as it's said. It also involves making money without limits. So there's no cap to how much you can make, even if you're investing ethically. However, whatever wealth you try to make should be made to protect 5 key areas of a human being's life. Your relationship with your maker, number 1, your health, your intellect and your knowledge, your intimate relationships, and also your ability to earn sustainable wealth for your family members and for everyone around you. So this is essentially the 5 elements of the Sharia, not the Sharia that extremists use to blow people up. This is actually what the Sharia is about. So 5 key areas, protecting key areas of humanity. What then is halal investing? So halal investing is making money for as long as this money fulfills 6 criteria. You can make tremendous amount of money, but 6 criteria is very important. They are very important. 1, is it lawful in the land that you live in? So you're allowed to invest in anything, provided it's lawful in the land you live in. And also, is it morally upright? So for example, you don't do arms dealing or you don't do illegal activities like pornography. Secondly, is it complying with these 5 aspects that I mentioned earlier of maintaining humanity and dignity of the human race? Thirdly, is it a tangible asset for use in trade? That is, can the asset be exchanged at arm's length? Fourthly, is it exploitative? For example, are you upholding social justice, or are the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer? That's something we need to ask ourselves. And 5, is it tampering with the laws of the Almighty? For example, are we overly speculating and keeping in our heads this divine power of speculating? That's also another question. And then the 5th one, is there profit sharing? So is it win-win for both parties? If whatever you're investing in satisfies these 6 criteria, you're a halal investor. Essentially, you're an ethical investor. That's what it means. And I would not, because I think my brother here, Abiodun, has mentioned a lot about asset classes. I'm coming from this perspective. You can invest in any of the asset classes he has mentioned for as long as they fit this filter, this criteria that I just mentioned. And couples, you can invest in it by screening it yourself, or you can go through a lot of platforms that you can decide, you can research on your own. I hope that answers your question, Chidera.
Yes, it does. I mean, thank you for breaking down halal wealth and halal investments. So basically, we all do it if we adhere to, making sure that it is for a higher purpose, a greater purpose, and we're not doing it for anything illegal and something that would hurt your fellow human being and all that. Okay, so I just want us to get some legal guidance, and I will just I want Elma to share and just throw more light on some of the laws that govern us in Nigeria. One of the key reasons why couples do not merge their finances is because of legal complexities. Like if the marriage ends in separation or divorce, sorting out joint finances may be complicated and may require legal proceedings. So, Elma, are there existing laws that couples should be aware of? For example, laws that govern the distribution of assets or debts accumulated before marriage or during marriage, following a divorce or separation.
Thank you, Chidera. Of course, there are laws that govern, distribution of assets before, during, and after a marriage. Maybe, if a person gets a property from when he was single, it is ordinarily, it's supposed to still be his own. That's why we advise people that they should go ahead and do prenuptial agreements. Of course, there are prenuptial agreements and there are post-nuptial agreements that could be done before a marriage and even during the subsistency of that marriage. Now, if Mr. A has a property before he married Mrs. B, and during the subsistency of their marriage, during the course of they bought other properties together. They bought other properties together. If in the eventuality of a divorce, the court will take into cognizance whether or not those at the time the property was bought, purchased, of course, it will take into also cognizance the input of both parties. So I always advise people, treat your marriage as a contract. If your marriage is a contract, it means that there is going to be an agreement to everything in terms of your property, whether it be it joint or several. It will be treated as a contract. When there is a divorce, the Matrimonial Causes Act is what the court uses in sharing of properties, especially when the children are below the ages of 21 years old. So if Mr. A and Mrs. B bought the property together, the court will determine how much was spent at that time. Maybe it will even decide that they should sell the property and then share the funds. But if there is no way to show, there are no contracts to show that this property was bought together, maybe the woman was just transferring money or giving him cash, so to speak, giving money to her husband, or maybe the husband was giving cash to the wife to purchase the property. There's no tangible evidence to show that at the time of their marriage that this property was jointly owned. Then it will, it can cause problems in the end. The other party can claim the whole property. So I always say, treat your marriage as a contract. There are laws of contract. Of course, we all know basic contractual relationships is, offer acceptance and all of that. Basically, the contract, treat your marriage as a contract, and then we see that we have more peaceful solutions and even peaceful processes of marriage. Thank you.
Thank you, Elma. You just mentioned that couples should treat their marriage as a contract. So can you share some specific legal must-dos, that you recommend to intending or established couples who are looking to build a financial future together?
Of course, you know that even though marriage itself is a contract, we can't actually, because of sentiments, we won't say the marriage is a contract. We like to see it as a partnership between two people, who have agreed to come together to form a family. We can't ask you to treat it in total as a contract, So I can't really tell you, oh, do this, oh, don't do that. But I always say, every rule that governs a contract, offer, agreements, should we not? Should we buy this house together? Yes, we should. Okay, then let us put our names together on the deed. Are we making investments for this and that? Yes, let us do this together. Also, I advise that if people buy properties together, they should also do a joint will in the eventuality of death. If a person dies intestate, it's already, of course, we already say that intestate means that the person died without a will. We know that the property goes down to whoever is his next of kin. And most times, or not most times, we'll see people say that that they have children outside of wedlock. A woman has a son with another man. She wants to give her property to that person. And remember that she and her husband worked so hard for this. So I always say to people, make sure that you have joint wills. You know the contents. Of course, if I have properties on my own, I don't expect my husband to know the contents of my will. But if we have property together, then we should have a joint will so that we know how our properties are going to be shared. I'm also going to use my husband and I for another example. When we were getting married, we made it very clear on what we wanted. We're going to have joint properties, we're going to have joint accounts, and it is written down, it is clearly stated. Reason is, I've seen people that do not have, anything stated, and then you make all the investments, and in the end, one person loses out. So for me, I always say, make sure that it is clearly stated. It may not be written like mine, but make sure it is either, if it is oral, ensure that you make sure that both of you, nobody feels cheated in the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elma. I mean, couples should define clear terms and, have joint wills. So this will just, make everybody or make the couples know what each person has, and how they can apply, some of the things that they've agreed on. And just to lay more emphasis on this, most couples decide to go into business together. And Abiodun, I think you'll be able to throw more light on this. So for couples that decide to go into business together, how can they effectively couple their finances to grow a business? And are there some best practices that they can employ to do this?
Thank you, Chidera, for that. What I would try to do is to compare a couple going to business with a partnership of probably like 50 partners. So I would just look at the spectrum, and there are certain things we can learn as we look at a more structured partnership. So typically when we look at like a 50-man partnership, what we typically see is evolution of corporate governance, institutionalized controls, and well-defined strategies. So I'm going to bring those things down in about some few points. So the key thing is, number one, what really is the strategy? Why are we really coming together? So if we have a partnership of about 50 people, they have what is called the 5-year plan. So for us, why really, what really is our business plan? What do we really seek to achieve? So there really must be a meeting point, not because one person really just wants to start a business, or that person wants to like, at least it's just this man is just going to be 3 months, another person wants to be like a lifetime business. So there needs to be an agreement as to really why are we starting this business. So having done that, there needs to also be like more like a structure in the business. So in a typical standardized partnership, you have what is called the policies and the structures. So now we are saying that what kind of structure do we want to really put in place? For example, are we saying that in this business, only one person, for example, can withdraw the partner's fund without recourse to the other person? So those are some of the questions that actually needs to be answered. In terms of the bank mandate, is the bank mandate that only one person can withdraw, or is that one person will withdraw and the other person needs to concur? So that's another controls that we need to look into. Then in terms of what each party is doing also needs to be clear. Are we in this business because I will be, probably one of them will be involved in day-to-day operational activities, or is that I mean, one party just going to put money, the other person will run it. So those little basics also needs to also be addressed. Then it's also important to talk about the fact that access to credit also is important. If you want to get external fund, so if you look at a structured organization, they can talk to a bank, for example, and get funds. Or if it is more like a couple, a two-man, you also want to consider that if you need external fund, what do you also need to have in place? How do you work together to ensure that you can readily have access to credit? I mean, to be able to build a business, that also needs to be considered. But despite all the 5 points I have mentioned, 3 key pillars are very key. Number one, transparency. No matter who is running what, there should be a transparent account or transparent reporting. There must be communication, and trust must never be betrayed. So once we have those 3 pillars standing, transparency, communication, and trust, then you also look at the other 5 points I've mentioned. I think the business can thrive. That's my view.
Thank you, Abiodun. Thank you so much. Um, Maryam, you shared some lessons from Islam earlier, and you have a specific focus on how Muslims can build wealth together. What are some of the lessons from your life's work that will be applicable to couples from all walks of life?
Okay. Thank you. So when you say life lessons, I'd like to share a very brief story about myself and how I started. It Wealth Paradigm, which is the company that I built, which helps Muslims around the world go from wasteful spending all the way to leaving a legacy that lasts many generations through working their wealth. Was something that started out as a pain for me. As a Muslimah, I looked around me. I had worked for investments, in investments, in the field of investments. I was studying investing. I was living investments, but I couldn't invest anything for my own self. And so I decided to start seeking ways that I could help my own self. And then it birthed into helping other people. And I'm very proud to say that we're gaining a lot of traction. So three things that I would like to say for couples that can benefit, that in the way that they can benefit by building wealth together. Firstly, try to gain wealth by following the source. And when I say the source, I'm going to use the word Almighty. He is this one sole source. So Oprah Winfrey said, sustainable wealth comes from connecting to the source, right? If at any point in time we find ourselves, whatever, it's most likely because we have either lost a little bit of trust in the source and his provision, or there's a bit of a disconnect there. So trust in him and his divine decree, and your struggle will not be in vain. Secondly, gain knowledge on investments. I cannot overemphasize this. Like Abiodun said, my journey towards actually realizing my own true strength started from developing my own self. Trust in yourself. The first investment and the best investment you would make is investing in your own self. Aren't you worth investing in? That's my question to you. You need to understand and familiarize yourself with the language of wealth. Otherwise, for example, if I find myself in China and I decide that, you know what, I'm going to speak to everyone in Hausa and I don't care whether they understand what I'm saying, that's what I want to speak to them, and that's it. Will that be an effective thing for me to do? The answer is no. If I learn the language of China and how they speak, most likely opportunities will open up more for me. That comes with also understanding the language of wealth, the patterns of wealth, the language of investing. I cannot overemphasize that. Thirdly, start investing today. When I first started investing, I invested with 33,000 Naira and I was petrified. Literally petrified is an understatement. I was literally shaking. So I got on a platform and I bought stocks worth 33,000 Naira each. And I watched as they went down and down, and I had a heart attack and I stopped watching it for like days. And then when it started making back money, I then started to boast and I was telling my colleagues, come and see me. But before then, I was nearly dead. So the thing is, start today. It builds confidence. Confidence compounds. I have lost a lot of money investing in agri, investing in several other things. But you only gain confidence and expertise by trying. If you don't give yourself the opportunity to start and to fail, then you've already failed. So those are the key things I would like to say. We have a free webinar coming up, but I think I'll share that later. Or should I say it, Chidera, right now?
We want to go into the Q&A session,
Sure.
Okay. I think that later, I'm sure our audience want to know more about it.
Okay, sure.
We are working against time. I think we should just go right into the Q&A session. But thank you so much for what you just shared. And this question looks really interesting. I think you and Abiodun should be able to answer it. The question is from Chioma Wigwe, and she's asking, please, what are those investments that can lift us above inflation rates? I think you should go first, Abiodun, then Maryam will go next.
So I won't be prescribing, but like I mentioned, if you look at the spectrum, I've already given some examples on high risk, on medium risk, and low risk. So it's really how to balance your portfolio to obtain a higher than inflation rate. I can tell you I have a rate above inflation. I can tell you as a fact. So it's how you then combine it yourself and also know your risk appetite. Don't do something because other people also are doing it. There are some tactics you can do, but understand it and also ensure that you understand where you are putting your money into. But yes, I've shared something on the high risk, on medium risk, and there are still several examples. Also get an expert to also counsel you before you invest in those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Abiodun. Maryam.
Okay. My view is very similar to Abiodun's. I want to use an analogy, and I like using examples because I feel like it stores the memory in the floppy disk that's called our brain. So think of a pizza box, right? The pizza box is sliced, like this. It's a circle, but it's sliced different sizes. That's how I want each one of us from this day to think about our wealth. And I get this question a lot: where can I put my money in order to beat inflation? Okay, good. You can do one or two. Most likely, if you live in Nigeria, those investments will be super risky because our inflation is double digit. So for you to earn that double digit, you have to take on more risk. But it also depends on your capacity and your ability to take on that risk. So what would be best for you is to look at it as a pizza box, right? Slices, you have a risky one. One slice is super risky, another slice is medium risk, another slice is low risk, another slice is cash, and other things. Slice and dice your wealth in that particular spectrum. Include real estate, because real estate is a good, what's it called? Inflation protector. But it's not the only investment and it's not the best. Like I always hear, real estate is the thing. It's not always the best. It depends on your capacity, again, and your ability. But when you look at it from a portfolio perspective, together as a full box, you might be able to beat inflation and comfortably have some change coming in for you monthly, annually, quarterly, and also have your long-term assets chilling there somewhere where if you need money, you can say, okay, I want to sell my property, and you have patience to wait for the best buyer to take over your property. So that's what I'll say. Look at it from a portfolio perspective and not from a one investment perspective.
Thank you, Maryam. I like how you related investments and wealth with a pizza box. And, you said real estate is like an inflation buffer. I mean, that's really interesting. Just so that we can move on quickly, there's a question for you, Maryam, from Hefziba Obiora. So she's asking, what happens when the woman truly earns more than the man? She says sometimes the woman has a better job and the man tries hard but barely meets up. What happens in this case? Like how
I absolutely love this question. It's something that I think a lot of women struggle with. I personally struggled with it even before I got married. I come from a place, a community where some women actually believe in hiding your wealth. So don't show your husband. You want him to know you. That's it. Don't show him anything. So I was struggling. I was scared to do it. And so I'm going to answer your question, my dear sister Hepzibah. Marry a man that's equal to you in flyness. If at any point in life you earn more than him, that's okay. You know that it's circumstance, but it's not that the nigga, sleeps, sitting there somewhere and saying, my wife got the dough, so she's going to feed me. No. So when you marry a man equal to your flyness, whatever circumstances that come to you, you can rise above it together as a joint partnership. But please do not allow yourself to go into this 21st century jargon, in my opinion, which says, you provide blah, blah, blah. From hunter-gatherer stages, the man used to fight lions and bears and tigers and kill them and bring them to his family. So please, in the 21st century, it's not school fees that is hard for him to pay. And my dear brothers, please avoid see-finish, as I've said. Provide the basic needs for your family. At least if your wife even earns more than you, it's okay. We will respect you, provided you communicate to us and you provide our basic needs: food, shelter, clothing. I can buy my own thing if I have money, that's fine. But communicate with us and respect that it's not our duty to take on your responsibility, but we will help you, we will support you. We are the pillar with which you stand strong. Amen.
Thank you, Maryam. I mean, I like your personal views on who should handle more of the finance load, if I can use that. I mean, there are a lot of interesting questions that are coming in. I would encourage everyone to share their questions in the Q&A box. But this question is from Eunice Olaye, and she says, just to clarify, the court won't look at individual accounts / property during a divorce. I think this question is for you, Elma.
Actually, the court, in determining what is for who and what is going to do what is just and equitable. Now, the key word here is just and equitable. If I bought a property when I was single, it's not going to be in contest. It will not be in contest when we're trying to divorce, of course, unless the man is a greedy man. Documents will have only my name. If I inherited it from my father, it will be shown that I inherited this from my father. The court will determine all of this when it's of course sharing the properties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elma. Eunice, I hope that answered your question. And just to move on quickly, because we have 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes in this session. Okay, Abiodun, I think you should be able to answer this. Please, can you state specific Naira assets that will give you 16% portfolio return today? Is there a combo of assets that FSDH offers that will provide this?
Okay, so like I mentioned, there exists certain assets that are above 16, but I think it's a discussion that we could have, and it's dependent also on your risk tolerance level. And yes, the answer to your question is yes, there are assets that return 16. And there could also be a portfolio, like a mix, that can also give the same. So it can be a direct investment, it can also be a pool of investment. So the answer is yes, there are, and there are lots that are above 16.
Okay, can you mention a few, Abiodun? Is that something you can do now?
Well, I think it's personal. We can share that off. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Abiodun. Yemisi, you can, I think what we can do is Abiodun should be able to contact you directly to provide a detailed answer to your question. We would follow up on this. But there's this question here that is interesting, and Maryam, it's for you. What resources would you recommend to gain more knowledge on investments?
Okay, in general, I would say because we have a diverse audience, I would say there's this platform I really love. It's called Visual Capitalist. I'm very visual, so I like charts and images. I think they simplify things very, very well when it comes to finances. Another platform is Medium. So if you go on Medium and you screen your choices and your preferences and you include things around money and finances, you'll find a lot of resources, even more than you can. However, on Medium, it's almost like an Instagram type of social media, so you don't really know whether it's authentic. But Visual Capitalist is very authentic. If you want to go really technical, for example, you have more than basic understanding of language, of investment language, you can go to sites like Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance, etc., etc. But if you want a more medium, easy to bite sort of resources, go on Visual Capitalist. I think you will love it. When it comes to halal investing and Sharia compliant investing, one resource I would recommend is follow us at Wealth Paradigm. So that's wealth_paradigm on Instagram and Facebook. And also there is a thing called research. I think it's called, I can't remember the name, but I can drop it so that the panelists can share with you some of the resources that you can also check. Google is also a very friendly resource, truly, but make sure that whatever you're getting Sharia compliant information, that this website is reputable. So you can use sites that have .org or companies, for example, like Russell 500 indexes, etc. And yes, the site is called Ideal Ratings. Yep. It can help you actually screen your stocks that you can invest in that are halal, but you have to pay a fee. So those are the resources that I'll say you can use.
Okay, thank you so much, Maria. I want to read a few comments here. So Tony Owolabi is saying that inflation is very high. 4 times average yield cannot beat inflation, especially in Nigeria today, without risking your investment portfolio. You may have to minimize losses by staying closest to inflation as much as possible instead of going for risky investments. Abiodun, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, your logic is right. Yes, you can minimize losses. But again, when you talk about having a higher return, it's a portfolio mix. So you have some assets. Remember, I mentioned that you invest along the spectrum. You have some assets in your low risk, you have your medium, you have your high risk. So your low risk is for preservation. Your medium risk is more of preservation and also a bit on the optimizing return side. Then the high risk one is more of the optimizing returns. So by the time you do your average on the portfolio, then you get a return that is above the inflation, and exactly that's the point. But your logic is correct. One way to also minimize this is also to reduce your expenses. I had mentioned earlier on too that if you also take some proactive approaches of getting some future expenses. I know from research, 2 major expenses are the school fees and also housing costs. So if you can sort out those 2 as early as possible, then the remaining part of your life will be lived with lesser expenses and just enjoy your life as you go.
Okay, thank you, Abiodun. Someone is asking if Maryam, if your organization can help non-Muslims. I think she mentioned it earlier that they do. So just for us, for our speakers to share quick closing points, what would you like your audience to take away from everything that you've shared with us today? I'll start with Maryam.
Aha, all right. So if you don't remember me for my strong language, then I think I'll be surprised. Firstly, I would say again, marry equal to your flyness if you're unmarried. Secondly, sign a contract. Your contract does not have to be legal. If you don't want to go into the whole legal, very strong language, but I've signed a contract with my husband, and the way that we did it was the contract looked more like an SLA, like a terms of how we're going to relate with each other. So it had to do with we'll treat with each other with mutual respect and dignity. We had a section on child custody. What happens if one of us is sick or one of us is incapacitated? So it didn't come from a money. I'm going to take half of your wealth, which can be very intimidating and scary for you to do before marriage. But please sign something between you and him, and maybe one or two witnesses from both families. And from an Islamic perspective, that is actually very necessary. If you don't know, I knew that too just before I got married, thankfully. All right, so then the last thing I want to do is I want to show you something. I like to use pictures. Hello, hi. So this is my favorite pair of shoes, okay? So I'm going to ask you something. Of what use is this shoe on my head, please? Can you write in the chat box? This is my shoe. It's my favorite pair, but what is it? Of what use is it? Is it very useful? The answer is no. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone's saying no. What if I told you that wealth is the shoe that now you put on your head, but it's actually supposed to be on your foot? It's supposed to be used. Many times we put wealth on our head like problem. Either it reduces the worry when you think of it as a tool to be used. As much as I love this shoe, if I leave it on my head, it's not going to take me anywhere. So if you use your wealth for your needs, two, for your chilling and enjoyment, and three, to give others in charity so that the Almighty is pleased with you and he gives you more, then you've put your money to good use, very good use. If you'd like more information about what we do, follow us at wealth_paradigm. And we have a webinar coming very soon, next week. It's called Secrets to Building Sustainable Wealth That Lasts Many Generations. So make sure you sign up. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Maryam. Elma.
Oh, okay then. I'd like to just say that everyone should make sure that you define your terms. Define what it's going to work and what's not going to work for you from the word go. Don't make assumptions. Like I said, see a marriage or any kind of union as a contract. Even if it's a civil partnership, see that the duration of that civil partnership, see it as a contract. Ensure that your terms are defined. Do not make assumptions. Do not make assumptions. And then if you're buying property jointly, make sure that both your names are on the contract. Thank you very much, Chidera. Thank you.
Thank you, Elma. Thank you so much. Abiodun, quick closing remarks.
So I have 2 points. The first is that for you to work very well with your spouse, there needs to be an agreement, and that is very key, because once you miss that, every other thing will crumble. Before I got married, I told my wife, I am like A, you are like B. Every time we have a discussion, we might end up with a C. C may look like A, C may look like B. But the point is that I come into a discussion, not that I'm going to come out the same way I come into it. I'm going to hear you, and then we are going to both come out with an agreement. So that's the first one. And the second one is, the second key point I will leave is that be in control of your finances. I mentioned the fact that don't live for now alone. Think about the future. Have a sense of how you want your life to be after retirement, pre-retirement, and start planning today. And make good use of your finances today. Take good use of the basic concept, time value of money. Invest your fund. Invest along the spectrum. Don't stay in the low risk. Don't stay in the medium. Don't stay in the high risk. Move along the spectrum. Keep your eyes on inflation. Beat inflation. And preserve the power of your wealth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abiodun. Very insightful takeaways from all our our speakers. Thank you everyone for taking our time to be part of this session. A recorded version of this session will be made available on YouTube. We will share the link to you all via email. Please feel free to share within your network when you get this email. I mean, our session has been quite insightful, like I said. There are a few takeaways for me. I particularly liked when Elma shared case studies on the general philosophy that couples have in Nigeria. And, she advised that couples need to define clear terms and, not make assumptions, because that's when financial issues crop up and then it leads us to trouble. And also Maryam shed light on, being on the same level, the same flyness level with your partner. And, it just helps us see the broader picture of things. And I also liked when Abiodun broke down, tracking your expenses and being in control of your wealth, of your money, making your money work for you. I mean, it just simplifies strategies that couples can employ, to stay ahead and win this 2021 and beyond. But if you're still wondering whether you should couple your finances with your partner, I mean, there's no simple answer that works for everyone. And as a general rule, you should aspire towards a tighter finance as your relationship grows in trust. Where you start from is up to you. Thankfully, Vested, our financial well-being platform, is designed to allow you couple as much of your finances as you're comfortable with in a secure, transparent, customizable, and convenient way. To all our speakers, we are honored that you took time off your busy schedules to share your perspectives with us today. We look forward to more engagements with you in the nearest future. And to our audience, we appreciate that you have given us your time today as well. And we hope that you found it as valuable as we found it important to share these insights and perspectives and solutions, to building wealth with your partner. I would encourage everyone to share their key takeaways on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, when we eventually upload this video. And if you had questions that were not addressed during the session, please send your questions to usercommunity@fsdhgroup.com. We should share this email on the screen now. We will respond to your emails accordingly. It's usercommunity@fsdhgroup.com. You can ask your questions. And finally, Vested will be launched in Q2 of this year and will allow individuals and partners plan, pay, save, and invest together. But in the interim, look out for our email communications, and please follow our handles on Facebook and Instagram. Our handle is vested at vested.ng. This should also pop up on the screen. You can stay updated on what's coming, coming events and all. But thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.